What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. This week, I sit down with Chris Van Vliet. Now, guys, as you know, I am a wrestling fan. I have been pretty much my whole life, and it's something that is really the thing I turn on to shut my brain off, and I get to enjoy it and understand that it is an incredible sport with incredible athletes, and I've just always enjoyed the storylines, as cheesy as it may sound to a lot of you people. Now, my guest today, I'm extremely excited to sit down with because I've been watching his YouTube channel for probably 2 years at this point, watching him interview wrestlers and really getting to know them on a personal level. And I reached out to him on Instagram and I was like, Chris, I would love to have you on the show. I love your interview style. And here we are. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation. And yes, before you shut this off, it's not all about wrestling. There is a small moment where we talk about it, but we really talk about Chris's journey of setting goals and executing them daily and making sure that whatever it is he's craving in life, the next step, the next big thing, he's going to accomplish it. Now, to tell you a little bit about Chris is actually a 4-time Emmy award-winning TV host, entertainment reporter, and YouTuber based now in Los Angeles. He has traveled the world reporting from events like the Oscars, Grammys, and the Cannes Film Festival. You may be familiar with the interviews that Chris posts on YouTube, but to just call them interviews doesn't seem fair because they are so much more than that. Chris dives deep into interesting topics with his trademark conversational approach, and that makes it feel like two old friends catching up. This guy's interviewed people like John Cena, The Rock, Hulk Hogan, and so many Hollywood A-listers like Oprah Winfrey, Tom Cruise, and Will Smith. And I'm just honored to sit down and have a chat with him. And now I get to call Chris a friend, and I think you guys are going to love this conversation. Now, before we get to the conversation, I want to let you guys know, if you haven't seen the announcement, if you haven't got the email, we have taken Growth Now Movement Live for 2020, and we've made it virtual. What you need to do is head over to gnmlive.com/virtual and grab your tickets now. It is going to be an absolutely phenomenal online event where you can connect with individuals. There's going to be live entertainment, yoga, meditation, and of course, incredible speakers like Nick Santanastasso, Natalie Jill, and so many more. So head over to gnmlive.com/virtual, grab your ticket, and I can't wait to hang out with you guys. It is now called Growth Now Summit, the virtual experience, and we'll see you there. Now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with Chris Van Vliet. Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me on, Justin.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited. So I found you because I'm a wrestling fan. And I used to be a closeted wrestling fan still until I started having Lillian and Jinder on the show, right? And so I started talking about it. But I watch your YouTube channel religiously. Like, I love your interview style. I love the interviews that you're doing. But there's so much more to you than just the guy who interviews wrestlers. And I want to dive into that and get the story a little bit. Why don't we take a minute, tell us who Chris is today, and then we're going to unpack how you got there.
Oh, wow. So today, I just moved to Los Angeles. I'm a TV host. I've been doing this for 15 years, but I've evolved into becoming a YouTuber and a podcaster, a content creator, if you will. And I think the bottom line here, to steal a wrestling phrase there, the bottom line is I'm just someone who wants more out of every situation, out of every relationship. I just want more. And that's who I am now. And I think there's been a lot of sparks of that along my life, but that's definitely who I am.
No, I love it. So where did that come from in your life where you're like, I just want more. I want to reach the next level. I want to continue to grow. Was it something that was embedded into you as a child, or did something change in your life where you're like, I need to focus on this?
I don't think there was a specific moment or a specific person that instilled this in me, but I would see people doing the things that I wanted to do. Like someone would run a little bit faster, and I was, a big athlete in school and in high school. And I would just be like, well, how'd you do that? Like, what can I do to figure that out? And I would always try to reverse engineer every single situation. I never thought that someone was getting an opportunity because they were, more talented or better just because they worked harder. And I figured, well, if I could also work harder, we all have that in us. So that if I could also work harder, well, I could do that thing too. I could learn the skills that they have in order to figure that out. So that was what it was for me. And it led me to being the vice president of my student council in high school, which was the guy who did the morning announcements. I hosted the talent show, and I just started to have this real affinity for presenting, being in front of people, performing. And when it came time to pick a college major, I enjoyed the communication studies class that we had in high school. We got to make a news broadcast every single week. I'm like, well, that's cool. I could get to be on TV. That's what communication studies is all about. So that's kind of where it all began. And I ended up going to school for communication studies, which was great. We learned lots of theories. I went to lectures. It was awesome. But I had this moment in my senior year of college where I woke up and I was loving college. I lived with 5 of my best friends. We obviously drank lots of beer because that's what you do in college. And I had this moment where I woke up in my senior year and I had this epiphany, and it just hit me that when I graduated this year, all of that was going to come to an end, and we're going to have to work for the next 40 to 50 years of our lives. And it was in that moment when I said, I don't want to hate what I do for a living. I want to at least enjoy going to work every day. And that was really the catalyst for me to go, I'm going to chase after the things I love. And if they don't end up happening, at least I can say I tried.
No, for sure. And then you end up on TV, right? So I think a lot of people are going to see what you've done and you've built out on YouTube and all these things. And they think, well, he got on TV, he's won some Emmys, so it must just transfer over to the success in the YouTubes and the podcast and all that stuff. Let's talk about that journey a little bit of how, first of all, how did you even get onto television, right? There's so limited amounts of those spots. And then why did you transition into YouTube and into the content creation? But let's start with the beginning of that story.
So the way I got on TV is ridiculous. So in that final year of college, I was trying to find an internship, and my school wasn't helping me to set up an internship. So I just started reaching out to a bunch of different radio stations, TV stations in my college town. And I just reached out to them and said, can I come in and see how it's done in the real world? And one radio station said, yeah, you can come be on our street team, hand out like stickers at events. Great. Awesome. This other TV station was run by volunteers as a community station. So I went in, I ran cameras and did audio. I was a floor director. This was amazing. And this other radio station said, we don't take on volunteers, but how would you like a job? I said, sure. They said, well, it only pays $8 an hour. I'm like, well, that's $8 more than I thought it would be. So they hired me on the spot as a board operator for an AM news radio station. So I had some stuff on my resume. And then when I started looking for an internship, I started doing the same thing. And I wasn't getting really any traction at all. So there was a small station about an hour away from my hometown, 60-mile drive from my hometown. And I found the general manager's email address on the internet and sent him an unsolicited email and said, I'm going to be in your town next week. It's spring break for me. I'm going to be in your town next week. It would be great to come by the TV station, just have a chat with you about this internship. It's like, well, if you're going to be in town, yeah, sure, come on by. We don't normally take interns that aren't affiliated with the school program, but sure, come on by. You got some stuff on your resume. And he said, I'm willing to take a chance on you. And that was how I got an internship. 2 weeks into that internship, and my internship, by the way, was like me going out with a reporter every single day, watching how it was actually done, watching them like turn a story. 2 weeks into my internship, the assignment editor goes, here's your story for the day. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, which reporter am I going out with? Well, you're going out with Terry, but this is your story. You're going to be on the 6 o'clock news tonight. So I'm an intern, 2 weeks into my internship, and I'm on TV. And that was how the rest of my internship went. I was on TV every single internship shift. And then they ended up giving me a job from that. So that was how I got my first job on TV at Chex TV in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. And you do what's called the one-man band. You are the one-man band. You write and you shoot and you edit and you report and you produce and you do all of that. And usually it's 2 or 3 stories in a day.
Jeez, that's no joke. Like, that's a ton of work. But the thing is, it gave you the skills to transition into what it is you do now with your YouTube channel. And honestly, I don't even know the back end work, if you have a team or if it's just you still, or
no,
whatever.
It's just me.
As of right now, it's just you, right? But it's interesting because if you look at the trajectory of everything that you're doing, there's a couple things that I'm picking up on. One is, saying yes to any opportunity that comes your way, as long as it's in the thing that you want to do. And two, show up in such a big way that people are going to want to present these opportunities to you, right? I imagine there are other interns over the course of this television, lifespan, this television station lifespan, that they didn't get that opportunity. What do you think it is about you? Is it the drive? Is it the determination? Is it the personality? Is it the whole package? Like, what is it about you that you think that you're able to step into these roles like that?
I think I had a real eagerness to learn. And I went into that TV station with a goal. Not the goal actually wasn't to be on TV there. The goal was to learn as much as I could so that it could catapult me to whatever that next job happened to be. And I think that me being clear on what I wanted from day one allowed me to interact with people in a different way. Rather, if I just went in and treated this as an internship, perhaps if this was for a college credit, I might have seen the end goal as just getting that college credit. For me, I saw the end goal as eventually somehow getting a job from this. So I went in with an eagerness to learn. It's that whole idea of, your mouth is shut and your ears are open. And I just wanted to learn as much as I could. Tony Robbins always says success leaves clues. And I'm such a big believer in that. The people who are super successful or just doing the thing that you want to do are leaving clues behind. And if you can pick up on those, I think that you can also start to become successful too.
No, for sure. And it's so true. Like there's a quote, it was said on this podcast in like the first 20 episodes, and it's really stuck with me. Somebody said, find the master and follow the model.
Oh,
right?
That's good.
And it's everything that I've really done. I've picked the brains of podcasters. I've understood their interview style. We were talking before I hit record about watching guys like Rogan and how do they handle their interview style and stuff like that. And with my live event, I mean, I've attended and spoke at so many live events that I was like, I'm just going to take every little, I like this over here, I'm going to put that into mine. I'm going to take this over here, I'm going to put that into mine. And it's really about like, okay, this worked. This means it can work for me if I figure it out the right way. So what have you done since obviously television and the transitioning into YouTube? How does it even make sense? Because there's so many people right now that they want to start a YouTube channel. They think it's going to blow up because they think they're whatever they need to talk about is so important. Like you transitioned to it and it's blown up. I mean, you've got videos that have millions of views. Some of the most ridiculous stuff on the planet. Like you're getting hit on by those two women. I don't know their names. I forget.
Oh, Leslie Mann and Dakota Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, what was it about that transition that you feel really resonated with people, and you've obviously created the success that you have now?
Well, first of all, anyone who's listening to this or watching this and wants to create a YouTube channel, you should absolutely do it. But you should do it knowing that the growth on YouTube is like super, super slow, Yeah. So be patient. And it's the same thing with podcasting, as you know, Justin. But for me, like my YouTube channel started by accident, if I'm being completely honest. It was in 2011 is when I started my channel. And I was just putting up the raw version of these interviews that I was doing on TV. So at the time, I was working for a TV station in Cleveland. I was the entertainment reporter for the CBS affiliate in Cleveland, which was amazing. I got to go to the Oscars and the Grammys. It was an incredible job. And we would put these segments on TV, but you're only airing like just a little clip, 20, 30 seconds of a soundbite. And I thought, well, some of these interviews are really great. Like I'd love for fellow fans or people that are just interested in this movie, book, event, whatever, to see more of this. So I just started throwing the raw version on my YouTube channel just so it would have a place to live. That was really how it started. And as a huge wrestling fan myself, I was doing interviews with wrestlers that we would air the like broadest part of their interview on TV to try to, encapsulate the largest audience. Well, I was talking about like storylines, and I was talking about like, their path to get where they were, which is stuff that like hardcore niche wrestling fans would appreciate. So I started posting those on my YouTube channel, and that really started gaining some traction. So it took YouTube was just kind of an afterthought. I'll just put my interviews on there, and whenever I have them, I'll put them on there. And around 2018, I started thinking, what if I started like actually trying? What if I started to do interviews outside of my TV job? Because I happened to be an event where a wrestler was, or I happened to be in the same city as a wrestler, and we could make this happen. And that's when my YouTube channel really started to gain traction, is when I started it. I always say vague goals get vague results. And the flip of that is specific goals get specific results. So I made a specific goal in 2018 that I was going to interview 40 wrestlers. And that was a ton. At the time, I was doing like 16, 18 interviews total on top of my TV job and on top of traveling a lot for my TV job. I ended up doing 50 that year. And then my goal the next year was 50 interviews. I ended up doing 100. So wow. It was like I needed to start having these things to chase after. I'm very like goal oriented and goal driven. I needed to know like what I was driving towards. So, if it was halfway through the year and I'd done 25 interviews, well, at least I knew I was, halfway towards that goal. And I think it's important to celebrate those little wins along the way. Maybe there's a month when you get 10 interviews instead of 4 or 5. And I think it's important to sit back and go, that was great work, like great execution on making this thing happen. Let's do more next month.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And, you talk about work ethic. I mean, you're talking about you had a day job and you're going out and you're doing these interviews and you don't do it like this. Like you're not until coronavirus, you weren't doing it over Zoom. You were doing it in person, in hotels and all these things. So it's really about so many different things falling into place for you to hit these goals. Like, what did that even look like? What was the time management process? How do you even schedule all this out? Because I think a lot of people go, well, I have a day job, so I can't chase after my dreams because I'm stuck 9 to 5. Well, that's clearly an excuse when people can see what you've been able to build out. What did that process look like for you?
Well, it started looking like me taking vacation days to go make YouTube content. And that's when I started to go, all right, I only have a certain amount of vacation days and I'm using them to basically work more instead of actually taking a vacation. So that was when I started to realize, I think I'm onto something here. And then when I started making more money from YouTube than I was making from my day job, and don't get me wrong, my day job was amazing. I've been able to interview some of the biggest stars in the world and travel the world to, go to the amazing movie premieres, like an incredible, incredible job. But now I have the freedom to do what I want, when I want to do it. And when I got into broadcasting, the model was completely different than what there is now. So, I got on TV in 2005, before YouTube existed, before Facebook was a public thing that everyone could join. Broadcasting very much still existed. And the model was what I like to call the spaghetti model. Networks took a big wad of spaghetti, threw it at the wall, and a few pieces would stick. So if you turned on the TV at 8 o'clock at night, your choices were basically what was on the channels that were on TV. Your other option was turning off the TV. Well, now we have this thing in our pocket here that allows us to look at any content we want at any time that we want. So I think the idea of broadcasting has gone away, and now we have this thing called niche casting, where we can look at the exact thing we want, and then you can even niche in on that niche and then look at just those things. So as the model started to change, I just realized that my approach to it needed to change too.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're talking about niching down, and both you and I are speaking at the PodFest thing on live. What are they calling it? The
PodFest Global Summit.
Global Summit. That's right. And it seems super exciting. Like I think they have a great shot at breaking this world record and being a part of it's really cool. But what you're talking about is something that I teach all of my clients actually. And it's really about niching down, right? Like the reality is people think they're going to buy a microphone in the podcast space, very similar to like YouTube. And they're going to sit down and they go, what I have to say is really interesting. Yeah. And I'm going to get millions of listeners. The reality is that's not going to happen. And when you niche down, you really find your tribe, your audience, the people that are supposed to be listening. And you've really mastered that, right? Like you paid attention to some of the trends. You're like, I was putting up these videos, these interviews, and the interviews with wrestlers were pop. And you go, okay, well, that makes sense. Those are the people that are paying attention to me. And you've really niched down into that space. So let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
Like, why do you feel like that's so important? And then how do you know what to niche into? Like, is it as simple as I'm interested in this, I should niche down to it? Or is there something more people should look into?
Well, I think that you start to see the trends and figure it out for yourself. So I was posting some celebrity interviews, like junket style interviews. I was posting some red carpet stuff. I was even posting some of my TV segments. But it was obvious that every time I posted a wrestling interview, especially when they said something that was newsworthy, like it popped like way more than the other ones. And I just started to listen to that. And it was the most important thing I could do is going, well, these things are working and these things aren't really working. So why would I ignore that? So that was, I think, one of the biggest things. But, to kind of expand on what you were saying, the best and worst thing about podcasting is anyone can do it. The best thing is anyone can grab a mic and do it. And the worst thing is anyone can grab a mic and do it, and it really saturates the space. So I think it's important to figure out the thing that you are super passionate about. And if you're passionate about it, that means that millions of other people on earth will also be passionate about this thing. And you will instantly have a built-in audience. It's just, you got to go find them.
Right. Yeah. And that's so true. And besides, to go even further, right? When we look at as we create content, you're like, dude, YouTube growth is really slow. Well, so is podcast growth. Like, it takes time. And if you're not passionate about what you're talking about, you're going to quit long before there's a success. I think it's Tim Ferriss that said 78% of podcasts don't make it past their first 7 episodes. Because people think, again, they're going to get these numbers, they're going to do all these things. So why not talk about something and niche into something that you're really passionate about? So even if it's 30 people listening, which could be a reality, even if it's 30 people listening, you're still going to want to show up. You're still going to want to talk about that topic. So where'd your love of wrestling come from? And why is that the thing you decided to niche down into?
Well, it was something I just fell in love with. My first exposure to it was in the late 80s, would just be on at my grandparents' house. And my grandpa wasn't like a huge wrestling fan, but Saturday night, if hockey or baseball wasn't on, we'll put on wrestling. And that was Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man and, Coco Beware, Repo Man. And then in high school, I was on the wrestling team. And when you're on the high school wrestling team, when you're an amateur wrestler, you're told, oh, that pro wrestling stuff, that stuff's fake. What we do in here, this is real. And I very much believed that. But I had a really good friend of mine who was a die-hard wrestling fan. And in the late 90s, when you have a good friend, you did this thing called talking on the phone with them. That was a thing that existed. Yeah. And I knew that every Monday night at 9:00, our phone call would come to an end because wrestling was starting. And there was one Monday when I said, I'll hang on the phone with you, until the first commercial break. We can keep talking. And I just fell in love with wrestling. I loved the over-the-top, larger-than-life characters. Vince McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin was the big storyline at the time. Yeah. And I just fell in love with it. So much so that I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I was a backyard wrestler with my friends. And
videos of this?
Oh yeah, I should probably post some. But they were like, they look like they were shot with a potato now. Like,
amazing.
I was Chris Sharp. That was my wrestling character. He was sharp talking, sharp walking, sharp dressing. So I wanted to be a pro wrestler. And that was it. And I had basically made this agreement with myself that I was going to go to college and also going to go to wrestling school. And I started to go to wrestling school and I started to learn some of the basics there. And I quickly realized that you can't half go to wrestling school. You have to go all in. You also can't half go to college, really. So I had to decide, was I going to go to college or was I going to drive an hour each way 4 times a week to go to wrestling school? And I just had to make a decision that school and getting a degree was more important at that time. And wrestling would always be there if I wanted to, go back into it. And I've been fortunate to be a ring announcer, now an interviewer. So I still have my foot in the wrestling world, but I'm glad I made the decision that I did with broadcasting. But still to this day, I love wrestling. And it's funny that off the top of the show, you said you were kind of a closet wrestling fan because it's this weird thing that you don't want to admit that you like. But then when you find someone that likes it, it's like that moment in Step Brothers. Did we just become best friends?
Yeah, it's true. I don't have many friends that are fans as well. And admittedly, I don't watch it like I used to. Like, time just isn't there, but I keep up with everything that's happening and it's super intriguing. And now I like the business storylines that are actually the real life business storylines happening behind it with Vince and the things he's doing. Now The Rock's buying the XFL, which is insane. But it's just so interesting because with wrestling and the fandom and all the things, it is kind of a thing people make fun of. But it's also intriguingly this multi-billion-dollar industry that clearly, I think it's the ultimate example of niche down into what it is you're passionate about because there's enough people that are passionate about it, even if somebody's going to make fun of it.
Yeah, right? And I don't know why wrestling has this bad reputation, but you get a lot of I used to watch wrestling. I'm like, I usually ask those people, what happened? Oh yeah, kind of just grew out of it. And I get it. It's not for everybody, but for the people that it is for, the people that are passionate about it are mega passionate about it.
Yeah. The least favorite thing anybody when you're sitting there watching it and somebody's not a fan and they're in the room, they go, "Oh, it's so fake."
Which is so weird because nobody's sitting next to you watching any movie ever.
Yeah.
Going, they're not actually shooting guns, right? Like this is fake.
That's actually my argument all the time. I'm like, so are the movies and the television shows that you
like watch. Nobody turns on Grey's Anatomy. They're not real doctors, right? Like they're not actually saving these lives.
I love it. So what's next for you? Like, because obviously the growth doesn't stop with you, and you look at all the things like you said, in passing in the beginning, you just moved to Los Angeles. Clearly there's more on the horizon for Chris Van Vliet. So what is it?
I just want more. Like I said at the start, I want more out of every situation and out of every relationship. So I knew that moving to Los Angeles would provide me with a lot more opportunities just because that's where stuff happens. When you're a TV host, I've been getting into some acting. So when you're a TV host and actor, I've been doing some speaking as well. That's where stuff happens. So I just want to do more. I want to expand on my YouTube channel too. It's funny that we've talked so much about niching, and I don't ever know. Is it niche or niche? I know they're both pronounced, it's the same word. I think
you can say either. Because I usually say niche, but you said niche and I wanted to sound fancy. So I said niche too.
I'm from Canada. Maybe that's just, how people say it there.
The Canadian way.
So there was a segment I did on the TV station that I was in Miami where I basically gave them my bucket list and said, can I do these things? And they said, sure. So I went hang gliding and I went to trapeze school and I tried out for the Miami Marlins and tried out for the Florida Panthers and the Miami Dolphins. I caught a 480-pound Goliath grouper. I swam with an alligator. This is the type of stuff like I love. Like I'm very much a thrill seeker. So I'm thinking of starting to put these segments on my YouTube channel as well, because I want to show people that like, start saying yes to more stuff. Stop living in fear. Whether that's fear of something in business, something in your personal life, maybe it's a legit fear of heights or snakes or something like that. Like start saying yes to these things and overcoming them. So that's, I think we're going to start to see a little bit more of that. And the cool thing is we can now create our own narrative. Yeah. You no longer have to have a TV show that's on CBS or Fox or Discovery Channel or even Netflix. You can have a great following on YouTube or on a podcast and create your own thing.
Yeah. Now, what would be your take if you put this out there and it doesn't get the views like your wrestling stuff does? Because people now know you as the wrestling guy, the wrestling interviewer. Obviously, you've been involved with AEW and all these other things. But like, what are you going to do, or what's the play if it doesn't hit? Are you going to continue to push that narrative?
Well, these are things I'm going to be doing anyway. So now I'm basically just attaching a camera to it. So like I'm going swimming with great white sharks in 3 weeks. I figure that's a cool experience. That's a bucket list thing. Why not bring a camera and just film it and put it out there? I imagine it's not going to get the views of my wrestling interviews. I completely understand that. But if I'm already doing this stuff, why not just bring a camera, throw it out there, and also have people see that like there's more than just one dimension. Like Joe Rogan is a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
The average person knows him as just a podcaster, but a fan of Joe Rogan knows he's a comedian and he's a TV host and he's a UFC commentator and. And I think that that's what I want. I want to be like an octopus. I want to be like an octopus where wrestling is just one arm, going on adventures in another arm, speaking's another arm, acting's another arm. And then I got 4 more arms after that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's the world we're provided with right now. We all have the tools, the opportunities, the resources to build out the life that we want. Like I actually just joined a small mastermind and we did the whole introduction thing. And they're like, well, tell us about yourself. And I was like, well, I'm a podcaster and entrepreneur. They're like, well, what kind of entrepreneurship? And I go down and like, obviously as an entrepreneur, you have all these streams of income.
Yeah.
I'm like, but that's kind of what an entrepreneur / entertainer / whatever is in 2020. You all have to grow outside of that little bubble that society wanted to put you in at some point, which is crazy. Also, another fun fact about Joe Rogan, he's apparently an incredible artist as well.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So Bert Kreischer told me this and they go, the reason he doesn't go in on it is because he has to go all in on everything and he doesn't have the time to go all in on it. But he goes, he could be a multi-million-dollar artist as well, which is crazy. But again, it's like, where do you allocate that time? Right. Like,
yes,
because there are so many opportunities, but we have to be smart as well with every single step that we take and the next thing we bring in. So how do you balance all of this craziness in your life with, making sure the content, because you're doing the back end stuff too. People don't realize the amount of work that goes into editing, by the way.
Yeah.
It's insane. So how do you balance it? Do you sleep? Like what's the deal?
I'm definitely not as busy as some of the people that we've talked about, but I love the quote from Oprah. What everyone has 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
And it's about how you make use of that time. And it's also important to not lose sight of the relationships that you have, the personal relationships, the friendships that you have, your family. So I think it's important to find time for all of that stuff. But for me, I start every single day with a get-to-do list. So I think a lot of people write down the things that they have to do today. I write them down as the things that I get to do today. And I take great pride in crossing those things off. And there's also a real sense of accomplishment at the end of the day of looking at the 17 things you've done that day. And some of them might be as simple as going to the gym or meditating or taking out the trash. But you look at this at the end of the day and you go, my God, like I did all of these things. So that's a big thing for me is scheduling out, not scheduling out by day, but figuring out like, what are the things I need to do today? Once they're all written down, I can go, oh, well, that thing's going to take a lot more time than the taking out the trash might. But that's also an important thing that I need to get done now. So and then I do that for the week as well. I basically nothing's going to happen. And I think you're a very similar person unless it's written down in your calendar. So I write it down on my calendar. I make sure that if it's in my calendar, this thing is happening. And if you say, can we do something at noon? I will be there at 11:58, making sure that this thing is happening.
Yeah, and I will say that you were actually, it was 2 minutes earlier. So I think we started at 11:30. You were here at you popped into Zoom at 11:28. And it was funny because I was like, there are two types of people.
Yes,
for sure. And like you see it in podcasting, you see it all the time of like, all right, we're starting at 12:30. Is he going to be here at 12:30 or is he going to be here at 12:40 or 12:35 or a little bit early? And I'm always that guy who's a couple minutes early as well. I actually at sometimes have to be like, okay, I don't want to pop in too early. Like just in case.
I feel you.
Yeah.
I think that's the greatest way you can show respect to someone is by respecting their time. Especially in a situation like this, for example, you're lending me your time to have this conversation. The very least I could do is show up on time. It's the very least.
Yeah. And like, that's how I view all these things. Actually, that's how I view. And when I talk about podcasting, I view a podcast like that, right? Like people that are listening to this right now, they made a choice to spend 45 minutes with us or however long we've chatted. And to be honest with you, I don't take that for granted.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure that I show up every single Tuesday. And if I'm not there, to let them know ahead of time that I won't be there. And so that's really kind of how I've approached this podcast game. That's how I approach life. And I think that's a huge takeaway for people as they're listening to this, because I don't think that's something I've necessarily talked about on this show. It's like, look, like be honored that somebody even wants your time. Show up and give as much as you possibly can. And that's the ultimate thing, man. And the cool part is you've had success in so many different layers and levels of your life. Like the fact that we haven't even mentioned that you've won 4 Emmys and all these other crazy things, right? It was funny. You'd mentioned earlier that you spoke at a school and the kids were more excited about your YouTube channel than the 4 Emmys. Just shows you kind of where the world is right now. But again, the cool part about podcasting and what you do as well, the interviews in your podcast, we get to interview some of the most successful people on the planet, however you want to define success. So my question for you is, what is your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success?
So my definition of success is being excited for the thing that I'm going to do that day, and then being proud of what I've accomplished at the end of that day. And the 3 things that I do every day to kind of drive at that is, number 1, be grateful. And that's something I can do at the start of every day, saying out loud the things that you're grateful for. And then right before you go to bed, just saying thank you for having these opportunities. Number 2, it's the vague goals get vague results, like being specific about the things that you want. If you get into your car right now and don't know where you're driving to, you're just going to end up driving around in circles and you're never going to end up getting anywhere. So I think it's important to know what your beginning point is and what your end point is, and then trying to figure it out from there. And then I think something that's really helped me so much in my life is reverse engineering. Figuring out someone who's doing the thing that you want to do. And if they're doing the thing that you want to do, well, that just means that there's now a path for you to do that thing as well. So figure out where they are, figure out where you are on here. So maybe they're at step 14 and you're at step 1. Well, now you just got to figure out what step 13, 12, 11, 10, all the way down to where you are, and then just reverse engineer your way up there.
I love it. So it's not every day that I get to interview other interviewers. And I look at this as a craft. The way that you approach something, the way that you approach the interview, the questions that you ask, why do people ask them? Why'd they ask them that way? And I ask all those questions all the time. So I'm curious from your standpoint, what's your prep like for your interviews? Is it super planned out where you want it to go? Do you just walk in and you're like, here we are? And then how has it evolved over time? Because I say all the time, like, go back and listen to the beginning of this show. I don't highly recommend it, but you can. And there was an evolution of these conversations for sure. So what was it? What's the journey been like for you? And like, what's your prep into the whole thing?
Well, you're great at this, Justin. You've done a masterful job of doing this. And so congratulations to you on that. For me, I try to do as much research as I can, try to know as much about that person as possible so that if the conversation pivots one way, I can actually pivot with them and figure out, what path they're going down now. I write out topics that I want to talk about, but when you're doing a 45-minute, hour-long podcast, I think it's hard to go in like a chronological order. I will say, though, that early in my career, when you had a 4-minute, junket interview with someone like a Meryl Streep or a Denzel Washington, you're well aware you're only going to get like 4 or 5 questions in that time. I actually would physically write out those questions, not just a topic, like word for word, physically pen to paper, write out those like word for word. So I had them ingrained in my mind and I wasn't wasting any time when I was in that interview room. I think that there's a huge difference between doing a 4-minute interview and a 44-minute interview. And I try to treat it like a conversation. If you were having lunch with someone that you really looked up to, you would find out about let's say they were an entrepreneur. You'd find out about their business. You'd find out about their background. And you wouldn't go in with a bunch of questions that you're sitting there while you're eating your soup and like, okay, now let me ask you this. You would just have a couple topics that you'd want to hit in on, whether that was in the first 5 minutes or it's towards the end of the conversation. You just knew that there were some things you wanted to cover. And that's kind of what I do with interviews now. I just go, let's talk about this, and this. And if this is kind of a touchy subject, maybe I'll figure out a really respectful way that I can ask this question without throwing off the course of the rest of the interview.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I've done that many times where I'm like, I know I want to get there. I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get there yet. But you really, especially when you're I've had multiple people cry on this show. Ed Milet's cried on my show, like all these things. But it's really about like, I know enough of their background. Like you said, you do the research, you learn enough where I know what they can talk on. But I also know, like, if I hear an interview that they're on, I go, that interviewer missed something. Like, I want to go further. I want to go deeper. There's more there, like all that stuff. You know what I mean? And so that's really interesting that we kind of look at that, at least that part in a very, very similar way, which I love, man. So obviously I wrap up every single one of these interviews with the same question, but before we get there, let's get to the important stuff. How do people find you? Where's a good place for them to listen to your podcast? What's all that stuff?
Well, my podcast has a really original name. It's The Chris Van Vliet Show. So it's VANVLIET. And you can find me at Chris Van Vliet anywhere, social media. So that's YouTube and Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And my channel on YouTube is just called Chris Van Vliet.
I love it, man. So guys, make sure you check him out. I truly am a fan of his stuff. Like, it's so funny, like, being able to have conversations. We talked about this before too, like being able to have conversations with people that we've watched for, I've probably watched your stuff for 2 years. Pretty solid. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, specifically when there's an incredible guest, which I admire the amount of people that you've been able to interview, and you do it in such a good way. And we never got to the DDP story, but we can have you back on. We can talk about that ridiculousness, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. And that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
I think career-wise, it was when I decided I was going to move to the United States. Being a Canadian, there's only so many jobs in the broadcasting world that you can do in Canada. And like as an entertainment reporter, there was like 6 of them. So when I got a job as an entertainment reporter for the CBS affiliate in Cleveland, sure, it was different from the auditions I was having in LA and New York, but I knew this was a huge step. I was being called up to the major leagues, if you will. because there's no limits. There's no limits in broadcast. There's no limits in business in the US. So that was where I knew that like I was taking things from like cruising at like 30 miles an hour to stepping on the gas and now going like 80 miles an hour. So that happened 10 years ago. And I've moved quite a bit since I've been in the US, 10 years. But that was it for me. That was the real catalyst for change. And that was what really took things up several levels in my career. And thank you to all the Americans who have welcomed me here.
Well, Canadians are the nicest people on the planet. And I say it all the time. Some of my favorite people still live in Canada, and they're incredible people to have around. So you fit the bill, man. Chris, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom, sharing time. And really for doing what you do, man, because you've truly honed a craft and you've gone all in, and it should be looked at as a roadmap for people to follow, right? Find the master or follow the model, man. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Justin. I want to acknowledge you for, first of all, taking the time to do this, but also for having the show that you have and for getting this wisdom out there and making it available for everyone. So thank you for what you do.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.